Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for the week ending the 13th of December 2024. Christmas is getting near. It's been a busy week. There's been a lot in the news. The Social Democrats are down a TD. The UK's transgender community are down puberty blockers. The UK's people who like marrying their cousins might be banned from doing that. There are new members of the Shannon. There are Shannon elections on. And Lily Phillips has been in the news for sleeping with 100 men. We're going to come to all those topics, but Sarah, before we start, the thing that struck me this week, and I just want to say to people who are listening to this podcast, if you have small children in the car, maybe, fast forward for a few minutes. Because I want to talk about this story that's been in RTE and other media outlets today, suggesting that it might be abusive or in some way wrong to tell your young children or to keep them informed about the existence of Santa Claus. What do you make of it?
Just giving people a chance to turn it off there in case they have children in the car. I think it's just more, there's an obsession with dismantling anything that is family, tradition, childhood. It's just getting to the point of weird now. I mean, why are you spending any time or attention on this? It is absurd. And I just think, the left, the woke movement, whatever it is, I just think it's 10 tons of irony for them to lecture us on it being cruel or unusual to teach children about Santa Claus, but not cruel or unusual to give them puberty blockers. I mean, really?
Yeah, well, I'm a fundamentalist on this. Santa Claus kept coming to me till I was 11 or so. It's finally when he decided I was a bad boy or whatever. And I think I think Christmas is never quite the same thereafter. I vividly remember one night when I was about 6 or so, one Christmas Eve, and it was like I think I'd moved into my own bedroom for the first time ever, and I'd put to bed and everything. And I vividly remember going over and opening the curtains like at about 9, 10 o'clock at night and just staring at the sky, see if I could see him.
I know.
It was magical. No, it was magical. And I remember going down the next morning and getting my presents and everything. So I think the idea that it's in any way abusive or anything like that to children is amongst the most offensive things I've ever heard. And I struggle to understand how an RTE editor could think that was a worthwhile thing to put out at this time of the year in particular.
But I think it's also worse than that, because one of the issues that I have, and I don't mind people saying that I, harp on about it a lot on this podcast, is what I would describe as the innocence of your childhood, and that your childhood should last as long as possible. And we seem to be consumed with, so for example, that children don't need to know about gender dysphoria or gender or, sexual orientation or sex or adult themes. We've had many conversations on this podcast about what is and isn't in school books pertaining to relationships and what may and may not be on the menu, as it were, sexually or whatever. And I think that this is just another iteration of that, in the sense that there seems to be this obsession with dismantling every element of childhood, every element of innocence, such that children become as close to adults as quickly as possible as makes no difference. And I just can't help but feel that, and I'm not talking about any one person in particular, that there's just something sinister about that. Why do you care about what children believe in? They believe in the tooth fairy, if they believe in whatever. And why do you care what they know? So my children will believe in everything that I tell them, as long as I can possibly make it so. And they will know nothing about some of the extremely graphic themes we won't revisit that have come up in some of the education curriculum. I don't think those two things are unrelated. I think it's all part of a picture or and I don't give as much credit as to say it's necessarily completely concerted plan, but I think it's part of a dismantling of family, childhood, innocence that all goes together. That's deeply troubling to me, and for what it's worth, over my dead body will happen in my house with my kids.
Yeah, I mean, as we know, I don't have any children, but I have nieces and nephews. But more to the point, like I have very strong feelings on childhood, though. I think childhood is just an essential an essential time where you're allowed to develop a sense of wonder about things, and believe in things like magic and believe in things like fairies and the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny. We never had the Easter bunny, to be fair, when I was growing up. That was just a bridge too far. But we certainly had the tooth fairy, and we had Santa Claus, and we had all those things that I think just make childhood. There's a thing called the wonder of childhood. It's about it's about the makes you think. I remember when I first started having. I actually remember when I first started having doubts about Santa Claus. I was 8 or 9. It was part of the thinking process, because you start to ask yourself questions like, that's a lot of houses to do in one night, right? And it's a lot of like, he has to be doing something funny with time there. And I remember having that thought, and I think it's part of working things out for yourself as a child as well. It's like a critical thinking part of the process. So I hope Santa Claus is visiting every house in Ireland this year with little children in it, and I hope he's drinking his milk, and I hope hay is being put out for the reindeer and all that sort of stuff. And I think it'd be one of the most awful things we could do, be to change that.
But I think it's also ironic that a generation of people, and there's a lot of entitlement knocking around. But I think that children, insofar as it's possible, are entitled to a childhood, are entitled to some magic and some mystery for as long as possible. And someone's bullshit new agenda to dismantle that, I think that's just appalling and weird and creepy again. Why do you care what people think, what kids think, what kids do? I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about my kids, for sure, but I don't understand why so many people seem to spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about what kids know, don't know, believe, read, watch, and do. It's weird.
All right. Well, I think we're in agreement on that one. We're in agreement on that one. And I expect the listeners probably are as well. But we've talked about it. We've registered it. We've registered our protest with the fact that RCE wanted to float this horrendous assault on the innocence of children and the existence of Santa Claus. So we'll draw a line under that. And we'll talk about something else. What do I have on my list here? Lots of different things. I'm going to go straight to, why not? Let's go from the innocence of children to the corruptibility of adults. Did you see the documentary with Lily Phillips that's been doing the rounds this week, or even any clips from it?
I've seen clips. I'm not going to watch that documentary ever, because
I watched
you go ahead.
Well, the clip, obviously, the main clip has almost 200 million views on the internet. And if you don't know what we're talking about, this is Lily Phillips. She's a UK-based OnlyFans star who a couple of weeks ago did this thing where she had sexual intercourse. Again, by the way, this probably isn't a conversation for kids either. We're not really a kid-friendly podcast this week. She had sexual intercourse with 100 men in an afternoon, basically one after the other. And she was followed by this documentary maker, Josh Peters, who's kind of a YouTube filmmaker who walked through the process with her, like from 3 weeks in advance to picking the outfits, hiring the men, booking the rooms, before, after interviews, etc. The documentary is on YouTube, but there's no explicit content. There's nothing, you can watch it without fear of encountering anything that you wouldn't want to see while eating your lunch. But it gives you the full story of it. And I actually think, I know you've just said you're not going to watch it, I think it is the most powerful anti-pornography piece of filmmaking I have seen in my life. Because it just walks through the awfulness of this entire situation. First of all, how filled with self-loathing Lily Phillips is. I mean, the very first thing she says in the documentary is he asks her to make a cup of tea and she says, I can't even do that, only good for one thing. Then it walks through how she got into this, basically how she started to see herself as only basically valuable in terms of her sexual attractiveness to men, how she doesn't think she'll ever get married, and if she does, it'll be somebody who might want to pimp her out to other men. And then it goes through basically interviews some of the men who are there to do the honors. And then, of course, there's this ending scene, which 2 million people have seen now, where she comes out of the room having just done what she's done. And you can see that she is red-eyed, she's shaken, and she says, it's not what I expected. And she bursts into tears. It's very powerful.
Yeah, I saw that clip. I mean, first of all, well, we've discussed, porn and lots of elements to do with porn on this podcast before. So I think that my view on this is probably clear. But I think this is just a form of abuse. I'm really disappointed that she found 100 creeps who are willing to do this.
Oh, there were multiple. She had 3 applicants for every vacancy.
That's weird, but fine. I don't know. Every once in a while, as human beings, something happens that you're just like, oh God, maybe aliens do arrive all the time and just look around and go, God, this is hell, and leave. Because this is just grim. I don't really have any words for it, John. I think it's really sad. She's somebody's daughter. It was a really stupid thing to do, but she obviously is deeply troubled to be doing this. And I would go so far as to say that she's so troubled that her decision-making capacity is surely, questionable. And this just shouldn't have been allowed to happen.
Well, she now says she's going to do it with 1,000 men in February. In 24 hours.
Well, she's an idiot. But and she's damaging herself and her ability to have a normal relationship with the man forever, probably. And the whole thing is grim and farcical and horrible. But just because she is going to do it doesn't mean she should, and doesn't mean we should watch, and doesn't mean it should be. Do you know what I mean? Like,
but here's the thing.
She's not a normal. She's obviously a very deeply troubled individual, and this isn't right. And
but here's the thing, though. Like, Lily Phillips, damaged. Is she a victim? Is she not a victim? Who fucking cares? I don't care. She's Lily. Look, she's a grown ass adult. She can make her own decisions. She's not the story here. Everyone's making her the story here, but the story is, as you said, the 100 creeps who went into that room, and the 1,000 who'll do the same in February. But more to the point, it's the 40,000 creeps who are paying her 20 quid a month to watch these videos online. It's the point that men are getting to in our society, where you become so addled by pornography that you find it arousing to watch a woman be abused by 100 men. And I use the word abused advisedly. I mean, in that clip, you see her and she's crying and she's red eyes. And if you watch the rest of the documentary, she says she's got red eyes because, not because she was crying, but because basically there was immense amounts of semen going into those eyes, even though she asked people not to put them in. And that's what people are watching. It's the, I see you covering your face there, but it's the orchestrated.
And also, I think I read an article about it where she said that each of them had a certain amount of time, but then they would go over their allotted 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it was, and she'd ask them to stop and they wouldn't. This is like something. Yeah. I mean, this feels very rapey.
Yes, and what I'm saying is the problem in society is that there are 40,000 men who are paying for it. Now, 40,000 isn't maybe a huge number in the context of all the men in the world. The internet's the wide open space, but this is just one girl. One girl doing this. There are hundreds like her doing similar things. We live in a culture where we've become so porn adult that people, I've heard loads and loads of commentary on this from what you might call the right side of the political spectrum. I read an article about it in The Spectator and in The Critic, and I have one out in it. If you're reading Gript today on Friday, there's one from me there. But I haven't heard anything about this. It's sort of mainstream feminism, Sarah. That's what I'm fascinated by. I haven't heard the National Women's Council on this. I haven't heard your women's studies departments on this. We keep hearing this is about consent and it's a sexual revolution and it's every woman for herself. This is where it's ended up. And it's
the National Women's Council are probably busy defending some chick with a dick who's done something somewhere else. So I wouldn't be counting on them to roll in on anything of any significance to real women anywhere ever. So put the idea of them rowing in on something worthwhile up on the shelf with your other dreams, maybe with Santa, John, and leave it at that. But you're right that you would expect some kind of feminist. But the thing is that there's a problem that has occurred, which is I'm 41. You had this liberation of women, and that women could have sex with men, and Samantha and Sex in the City, and you could just go out, you could have, sex with loads of guys, and it was just, you had this amazing, and it was all liberation, and, you couldn't slut shame someone and blah, 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 blah. And the truth is that nobody really wants to say, but I will, is that I don't think that that works for a lot of women emotionally. And I think that women bond in a different way to sexual partners. Don't bother coming at me with stories about how you're able to have sex with loads of guys and you don't care. You do you, hun. But most of the women that I talk to, my friends, they feel differently about having sex with people. They feel more emotionally tied to men that they sleep with. And that's just a fact. And so there's a problem, because I feel like a lot of that women's liberation feminist movement is tied up with sexual liberation, and not really, and finding it difficult to row back and have honest conversations about the different emotional manner in which men and women can have sex, as if that's somehow some kind of betrayal of feminism. Like, no one's stopping you from going to work, but it might just be a little bit different from you from having sex with 100 people in a week. Sorry, but it's just true. And nobody wants to grasp that nettle, because it seems like it might be a bit of contradiction in terms, but it's not a contradiction in terms. It's nothing to do with the women's movement or whatever. It's my experience. It's my experience with my female friends or whatever, that are men able to go out and have emotionless sex with loads of people. Not all men, but easier than women. Yeah. And it is a hill I will die on, that a woman of her age, a beautiful looking young female, as the expression goes, child of God, somebody's daughter, can have sex with 100 men on film and not be emotionally touched. It's a hill I will die on, John, that she is not going to be permanently affected by that. That every sexual relationship she has in the future will be damaged, and that she will need psychological help from this, and it will be a trauma. A hill I will die on. Nothing will convince me otherwise.
And I'm saying I don't really care about her. I mean, I don't mean that in a heartless way, because she's made her choices. But I do care, because you talked about women and what's happening with women, and they, the way they relate to men. And I'm talking about the damage on the other side, which is how men relate to women. How you got 100 people who thought it was okay to go into a room and stick themselves in this woman for 5 minutes and then walk out again like nothing happened and just use her. And then thousands of others watching online, and millions of men around the world watching pornography that promotes abuse and violence and degradation of women, de rigueur. And then you've got young women walking through that. And there's literature on this. There are articles on this about young women who are suddenly finding that, when they're 18, 19, 20, 21, whenever they're having their first sexual relationship with a guy, and suddenly they're finding themselves being spat on, being choked, being expected to do all sorts of acrobatic things in the bedroom. And it's turning men into animals. And it is horrendous. And I don't think we are, I want to know where the mainstream is on this. Why is it only people on the right who are talking about this? You guys created this society. You created this, you told us we needed a sexually liberated society, that we needed a sexual revolution. And I agree, there was obviously a pendulum that needed to swing in a particular direction.
Yeah.
But, you got nothing to say about that. That's what we're left with. So
I don't think if memory serves, there was something like this years ago, wasn't there? Involving Ron Howard, I'll have to look this up, but if memory serves, about 15 or 10 years ago, there was a woman who attempted to break some kind of world record by having sex with the most men in a row. And there was, some of it was filmed. People can put it in the comments. It's not Ron Howard, because Ron Howard is somebody, but Ron, an actor.
Are you talking about Ron? There was an American pornographic actress by the name of Ron Jeremy, who was later convicted for all
Jeremy,
sorts of
and he was the last one of the 200. People can look it up. I'm not imagining this. This happened, and it was a very similar thing. And as I recall, follow up with that woman was horrendous years later. It's not, and another thing is, Louis Theroux did an amazing documentary, and you're just saying about how this is, the greatest advertisement against porn. He did a documentary about porn stars, and then he did After Porn, where he went back and found them all 5 years later, and they were all troubled, drugs, alcohol, whatever, the men and the women. So you're right that there's no kind of accountability or acknowledgement that some of this has just gone too far and it's not good for people. But to your point about the men, what's the solution? The solution is that we have an honest conversation as a society about the fact that porn is really, really damaging, particularly for young people.
And the fact that there are thousands of men who are addicted to it. Men you wouldn't think. Like, I was talking to a Catholic priest recently. Now, I don't talk that often to Catholic priests. I think, for people who know me will know I'm not very religious. But I do try to maintain some friendships with the clergy. And this particular Catholic priest I was talking to was telling me that it's the number one thing he comes across amongst young Catholic men when they come to him and they talk. And I don't know whether this was in the confessional or outside the confessional. I didn't ask, but it's porn addiction. And that's the number one thing when they come to him for spiritual guidance. It is, I am addicted to this stuff. I'm a good Catholic in every other way, but I'm addicted to this stuff. I'm going home, I'm watching it constantly. And it's a problem at all levels of society. It's an unspoken one. But I mean, those thousands and thousands and thousands of subscribers to OnlyFans are coming from somewhere. Most of them are married men. Most of them are men in relationships. Most of them are men with functional jobs and careers who are forking over cash for, on porn, essentially, endlessly. And that Louis Theroux documentary you mentioned, by the way, one of the women he interviewed in that, I don't know if you remember, if you watched it, was a lady called Cagney Lynn Carter, who was one of the biggest porn stars in North America from 2008. I wrote about her in the article on Gript this morning, which is why I know this. In 2008, she was the best young starlet. She won a Lifetime Career Award. She won awards for best kind of various scenes, etc., etc. In March of this year, she put a shotgun in her mouth and pulled the trigger, as many, many people do who come out of that industry. It's one of the highest industries for people taking their own lives statistically after they come out of it. And she was a beautiful young woman of 36. So, I mean, this industry is destroying lives. And I just don't think we are having anything like the kind of conversations we need to be having about it.
Mm. Well, I think it's a conversation that this is something that'll run and run. And, until people are brave enough to have the conversation, it'll keep doing this damage. And if I hadn't even heard that she's planning on doing 1,000 more of the, but
by the way, she has her own, and Elon Musk has a question. I know everyone on our side of the fence was love Elon, right? Elon, you're a great guy. You took over Twitter. You made it better. You made it great for free speech. Lily Phillips has a Twitter account with, a couple of million followers or something like that, on which she's posting fairly hardcore porn of herself on a daily basis, and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of likes every day from people who are addicted to this stuff. And of course, likes are hidden now, so people can like this stuff without even worrying that their colleagues or friends will spot them doing it. So the taboo has been removed. So thanks, Elon, for your contribution. But I just think it's really important if you're a guy who's listening to this, if you need to hear it from me, I mean, I'm just a dude, but stop doing this. It's not good for you. That's
and also opinion. One of the things
I'm not going to pretend I'm an angel, by the way. Every guy of our age has been exposed to this stuff on some level. But I think it's time we started having a conversation about how bad.
But I also think that there was an entire movement in the States. A book was written about it called Make Love Not Porn, and it was all about this, and it was able to demonstrate. So if you're a guy and you're listening to this and you think it's all a bit funny, they were able to demonstrate, particularly if you were really young when you started watching porn, a link between erectile dysfunction in your 30s and overexposure to porn. So that might be something to think about.
All right, let's move on. Charlie Flanagan says we should have an investigation, Sarah, into all the Irish children who were sent to the Tavistock clinic on foot of the United Kingdom banning puberty blockers for children under the age of, whatever. I think puberty blockers full stop. And you're hardly giving them puberty blockers in your 20s. So they're banning puberty blockers. And Charlie Flanagan says we should have an investigation into all the Irish kids who went over there and were given them. I presume you agree.
Captain Hindsight, what are you doing here? The Charlie Flanagan is out copping on to what people like you and I have been saying for years.
Yeah.
Spare me. Charlie Flanagan, in fairness, has been a little bit more brave about this topic than some of his colleagues. I will give him that. Mm-hmm. And we should have an investigation into the Tavistock clinic. We should have had it a long time ago. Because as far as I have read, that the youngest child that went to Tavistock for was 4 years of age. 4. So this is the... and will be, I think, the child abuse issue of our time. So, yeah, we absolutely should have an investigation into it. We should have an investigation into it now. But we probably won't.
Well, a few people have been stronger on this issue than you. This has been your issue from day one since we've been doing this podcast.
Yeah.
In fairness, because you
You
hate
sound
the
like my mother. My mother said that to me today. She was like, "In fairness, you've been saying this for years." And
I was joking. Sarah doesn't actually hate the old trannies, by the way. That was my joke. But like,
they're not trannies anyway. Well, that's another thing. Anyway, no, they're not. I don't hate anyone. I don't think you should be going near kids, and I don't think you should be in female changing rooms. And if you want to be called Mary, that's on you. If you're an adult, and I'll call you whatever you like. But you're not going to legalize my speech about it. And you're not a real woman, and you're not changing breastfeeding pamphlets to say chest feeding and all of that nonsense.
Did you see during the week there was a new definition of woman? I think
there isn't, but go on.
Yeah, it was one of the health agencies, and I don't have it, and I couldn't remember it because it was like 3 sentences long. But it was basically something like a woman is a biologically female person, or somebody who identifies.
No,
no, the woman is a biologically female person.
Yeah, no, whatever you're about to say, full stop. A woman is a biological female. And everything else after. No. Okay, I'll let you say it, but I'm just saying whatever you're about to say is garbage. Go on.
Persons other than biological females who nonetheless experience the lived reality of a biological woman or something. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out at all.
Is that available on a Hallmark card for your mother? Garbage. Yes. No. False. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Never, ever, ever, ever will that be true. No matter how many people cry about it or say it or stitch it on a trendy t-shirt, it is not true. It's false. False. False.
So I can't become a woman for Christmas. That's what you're telling me.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Right. No, it's stupid. If you want to be transgender and you want to say that your name is Mary, well, whatever. You're an adult. Do what you like. None of my business. But you're not a woman, John. And you never will be. I'm sorry.
I'll try and conceal my disappointment. I'll leave you with what did Mrs. Doyle used to say? All the afflictions that can afflict a woman of a certain age or whatever. We men don't have them, so I'll live. I'll live.
No, I'm a woman and I've had 3 children, many different human experiences as a woman, and I think that women's spaces and the definitions of women, words are important, definitions are important, science is important, these things matter, and it's very important to me that, you know, my daughter can go to a changing room and be comfortable that there are women in there, and my daughter can be involved in boxing and not expect that there's any chance that she'll be punched in the face by a man, etc., etc. It's important. It matters. And it's women who have to concede all the territory on this. There's no transgender men screaming and roaring and jumping up and down to get into or transgender men screaming and roaring to get into men's prison or whatever the other.
Yeah, that's it. We've talked about it before. The stats from California.
Yeah. It's just a no from me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think your position on that is clear. So you're with Charlie Flanagan, but you think he should have been in favour of this maybe when he was Minister for Justice, is what you're saying?
Yeah, but like, we love an whole investigation, right? I'm all for an investigation of what happened at Tavistock, and let's spend, a load of money on that or whatever. But really, let's be honest, there are more pressing things right now. And the more pressing things right now are what's being done, in terms of like the approach that's being taken to children who have a common occurrence in many children, which they grow out of gender dysphoria in their childhood. What is the treatment plan for that? Who are the experts in this field? How can children be managed to feel this way, etc., etc. So an investigation into Tavistock is all well and good, but we also need to have a plan for, what a lot of, frankly, I think is contagion on this issue that's happening, and how children will be kindly and compassionately managed through that. And, in most cases, they come out the other side.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't think we need to say any more on that. Anyway, I wanted to ask you whether or not you think that people should be allowed to marry their cousins. Because just in case anyone is wondering of this, Sarah and I both already married, no interest in marrying our cousins that I'm aware of.
Neither of us are married to cousins. And some of my cousins listen to this. Some of my cousins listen to this, and as they know, I love them very much. But no, No interest in marrying my cousin. Thanks.
Mm,
I mean, just John, go on. Let's talk about marrying.
I have no cousins that I'd be of any interest in marrying, to be honest. No disrespect to any of them, but so I'm glad that didn't come up. But in the UK, this has been floated that there should be a ban on cousin marriage. And obviously, there's then been pushback from, let's be honest, a Muslim independent MP saying absolutely not. There shouldn't be a ban on cousin marriage. And it's become one of those odd discussions because cousin marriage, in the UK at least, is technically legal. And indeed, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, her consort, who founded basically the great granddaddy of the current royal family, were first cousins. Cousin marriage, the foundation of the British royal family.
Is cousin marriage illegal in Ireland, though? I don't think I'd have to look.
I don't know the answer. It's just not something I've ever considered.
Was it an urban legend? Was it an urban legend or thing, or what was it? But that you had to ask the Pope's permission to marry your cousin. Is that the case?
There's definitely something to do.
There's definitely something there that you were allowed to marry your cousin if you asked the Pope. You had to get an audience with the Pope and ask the Pope's permission to marry your cousin. I definitely don't think I made that up in my head because my mum used to say it as a joke.
Yeah, I think because look, if somebody who's a geneticist can weigh in on this, I don't know, but as far as I know, that like if it's just the once, the risk of kind of like genetic deformities in children is very low if it's first cousin and first cousin. I think it's something that they gave dispensations for. But I think the real issue in the UK is, and the reason why this has become quite a flashpoint, is the perception that it is targeted at particular immigrant communities who are quite clannish and where cousin marriage is a regular thing. Pakistani community, for example, where that is allegedly something that happens quite a bit, and where there is an accusation that this proposal to ban cousin marriage is designed at being one in the eye for the migrants, basically. But I don't think that's a relevant question. I think the relevant question is it something that should be banned or shouldn't it be banned? I think it probably shouldn't.
I don't think it's a pressing matter for anyone. I don't know enough about other cultures or what they're doing or not doing, but I don't think that there's that many instances of people marrying their cousins that it's a problem. I am growing more and more of a conspiracy theorist of the last couple of years, that sometimes these things are kind of thrown out onto the stoop just as a distraction, because they know that it'll get people all hot and bothered about it. And sometimes I just think, I used to think it was kind of a conspiracy theory, but sometimes I think I now really actively look and see what else is going on in the news when something like this comes out, because I think it might be a deliberate attempt to distract people from something else.
Part of it now this has been a slow news week. I can tell you, because I run a news website. So you might think there's a lot going on in the news, but actually there's not. There's a couple of big stories, and then there's not a lot else happening. So I think you might be right to some extent that the cousin marriage thing became something that the media latched onto in the UK to say, hey, why don't we talk about this for a while? This will get people clicking. And I think it has. But yeah, I just think it's an interesting one that people may have opinions on one way or the other. But I have to say I don't particularly see that it's a massive issue.
I also think in Irish culture as well, and this doesn't necessarily apply in other countries even, your cousins. Certainly when I was growing up, you're friends with your cousins, you hang out with your cousins. So it's not really that your cousins are very I understand that this isn't every family, but certainly in my family and in a lot of my friends' families, your cousins are basically extended siblings. So it's not culturally quite the same as, a country where you might have a cousin that you've never met who lives in a completely different country, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there might be some kind of arrangement or whatever. I don't really understand it. But I just definitely think in Irish culture, particularly, 40 years ago when we were born and even since, but maybe a little bit less now, your cousins were an extension of your siblings. Yeah. And, a lot closer than maybe they would be in other countries.
Whereas I am watching at the moment, and I highly recommend that people watch this if they're looking for something to watch on Netflix, The Empress, which is in German and is a biopic of Empress Elizabeth of Austria. Sounds more boring than it's actually really good. It's no, don't do your It's actually really good. It's got everything in it you'd want for the modern era. But it's a historical biopic of Empress Elizabeth, who's married to Franz Josef, who was the last emperor of the Habsburg Austro-Hungarian Empire. Point is, they were cousins. Their mothers were sisters. But they had actually grown up. She'd grown up. Her mother had married the Prince of Bavaria. She grew up in the court of Bavaria. His mother obviously had married into the Habsburg family. They'd never met until they were in their 20s, and then they're set up to marry. So I think the point you're making about it being different, where obviously there's more chance of a natural attraction if you've never met anyone than if you've grown up with them. So it probably was more an issue for the royal families of Europe than it has been for ordinary folks. Anyway, we'll move on. But if you have any opinions on cousin marriage, be sure to put them into the comments. What do you think of Katherine Zappone coming back to run for the Seanad in Trinity College?
Well, I'm going to do what you do. I'm going to be the new you, and I'm going to say I think it's a disgrace.
Say it again. Go on.
I think it's a disgrace. I think she is a disgrace. Right. So just let's have a little refresher about Zappone. She was summoned for questioning, am I right, by the government?
Yes.
During a scandal in which she didn't receive a job that was, created out of the sky for her because she was having little parties in the Marion Hotel during COVID, and she refused to come back and answer questions. And now she wants to run for the Senate. I think it's a disgrace. And I hope she
me to vote for her, yeah.
I hope she gets 0 votes. It boils my tits that this woman is so arrogant as to think that she can rock back up now after a little spell over stateside for a while, and now she's going to come back as a savior and run for the Senate and inflict herself upon all of us again. I think she's a disgrace. I think it's a disgrace. I was delighted when she lost her seat, and I'm still annoyed that she had a party for her friends in the Marion Hotel during COVID restrictions. And I'll just say, and it's, this isn't me telling a sad story about myself, because I'm not alone in this. There was loads of women like this, but I had a miscarriage in Holles Street alone when my husband wasn't able to come in during the same period where this woman was having a party for her fucking mates in a hotel. So I think she's a disgrace, and I think this is a disgrace, and I will use every piece of my energy between now and that Senate election to make sure that everybody I speak to as a vote on that Trinity panel is aware that she was having parties for her mates while women were losing babies in Holles Street and weren't allowed to have their partners with them. A disgrace.
Okay. And that, there, folks, that's how we make a clip. That's going. Well, I didn't do it on purpose. Sarah did it. That's going to be our short clip for this week. That's going to go super viral on TikTok about Katherine Zappone.
Well, I don't want any focus on women. It's not about me. Women have miscarriages, unfortunately. Often, it's not. It's relatively common. This isn't about me or being a sad story about me. It just makes me so angry that there was restriction in place where women suffered like that, and she was having an audience with people in a hotel. Yeah. I'm incensed years later, and I'd forgotten all about her. And then when the list came out of people who were running for the Senate, and I saw it on Twitter, and I saw her name, I was like, I cannot believe that this thing is back. And here she is, summoned up all of the audacity in her body to rock back up and run for the Senate. A disgrace, John.
Well, I don't even know if I'm on the register. I should be on the register. I don't know if I am. But if I am, I'm voting for my old mate and yours, Leisha de Bruin, who set up the Countess. And she's running for the Seanad because I think she thinks she's with you on that whole. She doesn't like the trannies either, I think, is the whole point.
Stop saying it like Leisha is a barrister, a highly accomplished woman with children who has set up the Countess and has been an advocate for women and children on this issue for years. She set up a movement called the Countess from scratch on her own, and she'd be an amazing senator. So you don't have to look far to have a infinitely better option. But
also, if it's not clear, I'm absolutely terrified of her, which is probably a good sign of her ability to work in the Seanad. So she asked me to vote for her, and I will. Hazel Chu is also running for that Seanad seat in Trinity, which just makes me wonder, does this woman hate her job on Dublin City Council? What's the story there? I mean, she just got re-elected to City Council in June. This is now the second new job she sought in a couple of months.
Go on, expand on your point. So you think, are you getting the impression she doesn't really want to be a councillor?
Yes, I am. It's
it's funny,
bizarre.
isn't it?
She doesn't really want to be a councillor at all. She didn't get elected. Actually, in fairness to her, I think, no, it's not the first election she's lost, but like her first competitive election with multiple seats available that she's lost in the general election just gone by. And now she wants the people in Trinity to elect her to the Senate. I mean, that's going to be an interesting election. Obviously, Tom Clonan is running, and Lynn Ruane, the sitting senator, not exactly, in my view, covered herself in glory as sitting senator, is also running. I mean, I just think one of Chu and Zappone is going to win. That's the bad news. I know that electorate. They're terrible people. The Trinity electorate is the worst electorate, the worst shower of voters in the country. I mean, they're awful. And I say this as one of them. They're just the worst voters that we have. They just make the worst decisions all the time. And I think they're going to elect one of Zappone or Chu because they're just terrible.
What would you pick between the two? It's like, which would you prefer? A punch in the face or a kick in the face?
No, I pass. It would be inappropriate for me as a journalist to comment on who my preferred candidate would be. Right. That's what's happening in the shadow. What's been happening in politics? We'll finish off on the story of poor old Eoin Hayes. Do you have any sympathy for poor old Eoin Hayes, the Social Democrat TD, for about 5 minutes?
I do and I don't. So I think that if you place yourself, as the Soc Dems do, up on this lofty, high moral plane about everything, then you have to accept that might come back to bite you in the arse sometimes. I also think, and like, you know, I think that we need more people who come from private sector backgrounds and who have different things to bring to the table. So I'm all for that in principle. And I think if you work in a lot of different industries, you can't really be held accountable for everything that a company you work for does. Do you know what I mean? Like, to a point. I think the issue I have with him, and where I think he's come a cropper, is the lying. It's always the lying what'll get you. And saying that you discharged your shares before you entered politics, when you discharged the shares in July and you got elected in June, is not true. But like, you knew that wasn't true when you said it. So I think, come on, John.
But it's such a dopey lie. Like, why would you tell that lie? I mean, here's the thing. I tend to think when a lad tells a lie that's stupid and that pointless 23 times in a row, he might not have been deliberately lying. I mean, here's my point. Just let me play this out. Let's say he was asked, "Oh, when did you sell those shares?" And he said, "In July, shortly after I became a councillor. I wanted to get rid of them. I got elected to the council. I sold them in July." Which is the truth. Do we think that would have... Yeah, but no. Do we think that would have cost him his job? His job, but his role in the Social Democrats? No, it wouldn't have. So what reason?
Well, maybe. I mean, they do... They are a bit. But okay. But maybe not.
I would have been. No, because remember, they've sacked him for the lying. That's the official reason. No, because he lied. But I'm telling you, like, what reason had he to tell this lie? He had no reason to lie, which leads me to believe it's just possible, like, hear me out, that the dumb fool made a mistake. That he was like, "Oh, when did I sell him? July. When politics? Yes. When did I join the council?" I mean, first council meeting probably wasn't in July, right? I think he probably just made a mistake. And I think the Social Democrats, looking for an excuse to be Puritan on Israel, were like, "Okay, you've lied and we're going to throw you out now." I think it is utterly pathetic. I think it's about the worst. You know, do you remember you were on the phone to me the other evening? I think it was you were on the phone to me the other evening and you said, "Oh, they've kicked him out." And I couldn't believe it. I actually couldn't believe it. You didn't even know.
Because it had just come out. Yeah.
Just come out. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this guy, first of all, I have no sympathy for him, Sarah, on one level, because he's a Social Democrat, first of all. But secondly, he'd have no sympathy for anyone else in this position. The Social Democrats kicked out Orly Dugani, who was one of their candidates in the local elections. Essentially, it seems to me, because she was a Jewish woman who didn't necessarily agree with their stance on Israel, so she'd to go. He didn't open his mouth on the unfairness of that. I don't think I think it was any other Social Democrat TD. I think he'd been standing there doing the smug thing Social Democrats do, standing there smugly, holier than thou. And I think when somebody gets hung by their own petard on the revolution that they've had, I'm happy about it. But I think what it says about
Oh no!
Irish
If it was somebody from another party, like Holly Kearns would have been out being like, "This is just like an absolute disgrace, feeling like think of the children," and like we'd all have to suffer the outrage of them. So like yeah, live by the sword, die by the sword, and all that. But I still think it's the line. It's the line that gets you, and the whole thing was absurd. They all came out in a line for their press conference, and he just keeps being asked. I also think it speaks to a remarkable lack of political savvy on behalf of the party leadership. We'll give him the bit of grace that he's a new TD and maybe he's not really that accustomed to politics, but it was so obvious this was going to come up, and how they didn't have a plan, and how somebody didn't give him some counsel, some advice, and say, okay, this is what you're going to say, you're going to tell the truth, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, is baffling to me, because I don't think that anybody with half a political brain would have advised him to do exactly anything other than what he did.
You say it's obvious this is going to come up. I mean, our fucking media. I mean, they're embarrassing. Like, Roderick O'Gorman during the referendums, the mother and whatever the other referendum was, definitely lied to the voters repeatedly about what the implications were for immigration, family reunification, lied about the implications for, I can't even remember, lied through his teeth.
Lied about legal advice that was given pertaining to what would be the consequences of changing the... Yeah.
Did these clowns in the media give a shit? They no. No, they, in fact, barely asked a question. Tutted when other people ask questions. But then there's some lad had shares in a company which once did business with the Israelis, but which also does business with lots of other countries and lots of other businesses. And there's no evidence that Eoin Hayes did any work at all relating to the Israelis. 23 questions. It's a very serious issue, Mr. Hayes. We need answers on this, We get them. I'm going to stop. I've said the F word twice in one podcast, and I don't even think I'm going to make it the hour, so I'm not going to say it again. But get the hell off the stage. I mean,
just like full disclosure, you just feel sorry for him because he looks like Ben, and I am just defending him because I'm terrified that he'll actually have to fully resign. There'll be a by-election, and Chris Andrews will somehow manage to sneak his way back into a seat there.
Oh, did you see that?
And that just like that'll be like I've been brought up to the top of the mountain, shown how wonderful the world can be, and then marched back down the mountain until he's back after 6 weeks or something. So that's not.
You didn't get the Sinn Féin
kick him out of the sock Dems. Kick him out of the sock Dems, but let's not go crazy. You can stay.
You didn't get the Sinn Féin press release. Oh, Matt Carthy, my county man, who I like, lovely guy in person. Have a pint with Matt any day of the week. But I've never received such a snivelling press release in my whole life. Matt Carthy emailed in to all the media to let us know that Eoin Hayes won that seat there under false pretenses. He was pretending he was anti the Israelis and he was against them. And Chris Andrews, he's the one who really, really, really hates the Israelis, hates them much more than anybody else. And he should have had that seat. And Eoin Hayes doesn't hate the Israelis as much as Chris Andrews does. And Eoin Hayes should do the decent thing and resign his seat so that a true Israel hater in Chris Andrews should have it back. I mean, it's a good job I value my possessions, or I would have thrown something at the screen when I read that email. I mean, these people are inexorably pathetic. It's so pathetic.
What's the seat difference between Fine Gael and Sinn Féin?
Sinn Féin have one more.
Oh, so if they won another one, they get two. But I don't think Chris Andrews would win that. All jokes aside, I don't think Chris Andrews would win that by-election anyway.
Be interesting, because the Social Democrats wouldn't win it now because they've deceived the public about how much they hate the Israelis.
No, I think
insufficient Israel haters.
I think probably Emma Blaine would win that.
I mean, Fine Gael should have won the last one there, but the problem is that the Fine Gael always they're always in the lead in that constituency, but then all the lefties gang up on them. Isn't that it? I'd be worried that the Labour Party would win that seat. They'd win a second seat there. Maybe for old Dermot Lacey. Big fan of Dermot Lacey. Maybe he'd get to be TD finally. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. Anyway, I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to be an independent for a while. I think he's going to vote with the Soc Dems on everything, and then after a while he'll just quietly rejoin. That'll be it. Yeah,
probably. And he'll come out and make a statement about how he really, 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 really hates the Israelis. So he'll be allowed in. It's like a Father's Head episode, isn't it?
It's just like also like it must be really annoying, like to be a Soc Dem and like good week, bad week, like it's going well, and now that's all anybody wants to talk about. Got a serious bloody nose. Although I did see Gary Gannon being interviewed, and he did really well. I mean, I like instead of doing the normal Irish politician thing of when they were like, well, this is a bit of a bad week for the Soc Dem, instead of being like, no, and the public are on our, he just was like, yeah, no, sometimes you get a bloody nose, and I'm happy with the way we've managed it, but like, yeah, no, it wasn't ideal, and we're just going to try and move on now. And I was like, yeah, that's the way to handle it.
Yeah.
He's actually, I mean, I don't agree with any of his politics, but he actually did quite well there. He might be, I dare say, better than other people in that party.
Oh, yes. Well, we'll see. I've always said this, but I'll say it again. I'm always honest with this. Don't agree with him on anything. Lovely guy in person. Lovely guy. Couldn't meet a nicer guy than Gary Gannon. Just don't tell you that.
I've never met him.
Wouldn't vote for him in a million years. Wouldn't expect him ever to vote for me, but a lovely guy. All right. I think we'll leave it there. To be honest, unless you had anything else that was burning in your chest to get out.
No, we've both said the F word, and I said that something was a disgrace. So I think
your tits got boiled.
And my tits got boiled. So I think that's a full lid for today, John.
Yeah, it's a full lid for today. All right. Well, look, if you've enjoyed our inflammatory language, boiling boobs, and general sort of and immense conservatism and pornography, welcome back next week when we'll be reviewing the year and seeing how we did, and then we'll be glad to know we'll be taking it. Yeah, we'll be. I'm looking forward to it, Sarah. I get to go through my predictions because everyone says I get everything wrong, and I get to go through my predictions I made at the start of the year. Do you remember? We did a whole podcast at the start of the year. We walked through my predictions and we see how many I got right. And so that'll be fun. And then after that, we'll probably go on a Christmas holiday for a week or two because no one wants to listen to us over Christmas when you could be, I don't know, watching old movies or something instead.
And we are really tired. And by the way, that actually reminds me that sometimes in the comments, people give out because we forget things or, say things wrong or something. But like, just so you know, I have a full-time job and 3 children. We both have full-time jobs. We're very tired and it's the end of the year. So give us a little bit of a break when it comes to recall on some facts.
No, I've had the flu from hell all week, by the way. I don't know how I got through this, but
I have had all of my children are sick with the flu from hell. But I have remained somehow. I'm one of those people who, every Christmas, the day after Christmas, they just go kabam and get sick.
Yeah.
That probably happened.
You just won't get sick until you've cooked the dinner for everybody. And
everyone is fed and everyone is happy. Then I will take to the bed.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for watching. It's been a pleasure as always. We'll see you back next week. That was the week that really was. Have a great weekend and we'll talk to you soon.